Redemption. The storm that had surrounded Travis reached its peak in the days following the gala. Headlines grew bolder, public debates filled television screens, and social media erupted with voices demanding answers. Some condemned him as a man of wealth who had chosen pride over responsibility. Others defended him as a target of opportunists, yet, beneath all the noise, one truth remained unshaken. The resemblance between the child and the man who had denied him was undeniable. The storm-gray eyes became a symbol appearing in articles, sketches, even online posters. People began to ask, how long can a man deny what the world can see so clearly? Travis shut himself away in his mansion, the weight of silence pressing on him heavier than the judgment of the crowd. His advisors urged him to stand firm, to deny until the story burned itself out. But Travis knew the fire would not die because the fire lived inside him, in the memory of a child's fragile breath during a night at the clinic, in the sound of Maya's calm voice that refused to break, in the way his own reflection seemed to accuse him each time he looked in the mirror. He had spent his life controlling narratives, bending truth to his will, but now the truth had bent him, and no amount of denial could straighten it again. One evening, unable to bear the silence of his empty halls, Travis drove himself back to the neighborhood he once thought beneath him. He parked near Maya's building and climbed the worn steps, each footfall heavy with hesitation. When she opened the door, her expression was cautious, her eyes tired but steady. She held the baby in her arms, the boy now stronger, healthier, his gaze alert and piercing. For a long moment, they simply looked at one another, no words spoken, only the truth passing silently between them. Finally, Travis cleared his throat, his voice low, uncertain in a way Maya had never heard before. I cannot undo what I have done. I cannot erase the words I spoke or the pain I caused, but I see him now and I see you, and I cannot walk away again. Maya's lips trembled, her grip on the baby tightening. She had dreamed of these words and dreaded them all the same, because promises were easy, but actions were not, she said quietly. He does not need your money or your name. He needs your heart. If you cannot give that, then stay away. The challenge in her words struck him harder than any insult, because it revealed the depth of her strength. She had survived without him. She had raised their son with love that no amount of wealth could match. And now she demanded not charity, not recognition, but humanity. He nodded slowly, his voice breaking. I want to try. Maya studied him, searching for cracks of sincerity, and for the first time, she saw something different in his eyes. Not arrogance, not denial, but humility. A man stripped of pride and forced to confront his failures. She stepped aside silently, allowing him into the small apartment. Travis looked around, the peeling paint, the worn furniture, the modest crib. It was a world so far from his mansion, yet it felt more alive than anything in his grand halls. He sat cautiously near the crib as Maya placed the baby inside. The child looked up at him, storm-gray eyes unblinking, and Travis felt his chest tighten. He reached out slowly, his hand trembling. When the baby's tiny fingers curled around his, something inside him broke open. The walls of denial, the armor of pride, the shield of wealth all crumbled, leaving behind only a man, a father, and a truth too powerful to deny. The following days were filled with quiet changes. Travis returned often, not with grand gestures, but with time. He held his son, listened to Maya, asked questions about his needs. The world outside still clamored for headlines, but inside that small apartment, a different story was being written, one of slow healing, of trust being tested and rebuilt eventually. Travis knew he could no longer remain silent in public. The weight of expectation and truth demanded a reckoning. At a press conference called weeks later, cameras flashed, microphones crowded around him. The world waited, and Maya watched from the doorway of her apartment with her son in her arms. His voice, usually sharp and commanding, was calm but heavy. For too long I denied what was in front of me. I chose pride and fear over responsibility, and in doing so, I hurt the people who deserved it least. Today I say without hesitation, the child is mine, and I will not walk away again. The room erupted with questions, but his words cut through them all. Headlines shifted, debates transformed. Some continued to judge him, others praised his courage. But for Maya, none of it mattered. What mattered was not the words spoken to cameras, but the time he continued to give when the cameras were gone. As the months passed, change came slowly. Travis was not perfect. He stumbled. He struggled to balance the world he had built with the world he was now learning to cherish. But he kept showing up, and that mattered more than anything. Maya, though cautious, allowed him space to prove himself. She remained the steady anchor of her son's world, her love unshaken, her dignity intact, And in the eyes of the child, storm gray and full of light, the past did not matter. The future stretched wide. Filled with possibilities, he would grow not only with the love of a mother who had never abandoned him, but with the presence of a father who had finally learned that true wealth was not measured in money, but in love in the end. Their story was not about scandal or whispers, not about wealth or status, but about resilience, redemption, and the power of truth. Maya had stood unbroken in the face of cruelty. Travis had faced his own failings and found the courage to change, and together they had given their child something greater than any legacy of power. They had given him a family, imperfect but real, and as Maya held her son close one evening, watching Travis gently rocking him to sleep, she whispered softly, more to herself than to anyone else, "We made it, my love. We are no longer defined by his denial or by their whispers. We are defined by love, and that is enough." The storm breaks. The silence that Travis had clung to for months finally shattered when the whispers that once lived only in neighborhoods and quiet hallways spilled into the public eye. It began with a blog post written by someone who claimed to have seen him at the hospital. Then a photograph surfaced of Maya, leaving the clinic late at night with her child wrapped in a blanket. The story spread quickly, traveling from small gossip pages to larger news outlets, until finally it appeared in bold headlines. Billionaire refuses child with Maid. Rumors swirl around striking resemblance. Travis had faced countless scandals before, business rivalries, accusations, lawsuits, but none of them pierced him the way this one did. Because this time the story carried a face, a small innocent face with storm gray eyes that looked unmistakably like his own. His advisors urged him to release statements, to deny everything firmly, to protect his empire at all costs. "This is nothing more than a trap," one insisted. "She is looking for money. We will crush this story," another argued. But Travis found himself unable to respond. Every denial that formed in his mind was drowned out by the memory of that night in the clinic, of the way his son had looked at him, of the way Maya had stood unbroken despite exhaustion and judgment for the first time in his life. He did not know what to say. The media frenzy grew louder. Journalists camped outside his mansion. Photographers followed him to board meetings. Microphones were shoved into his face with questions he could not answer. "Mr. Travis, is it true? Is the child yours? How do you respond to those who say you abandoned them? What about the storm gray eyes? Sir, the resemblance is striking." Each question chipped away at the fortress he had built around his image. Each silence spoke louder than denial. Meanwhile, Maya's world was turned upside down as well. Her small apartment was no longer a quiet refuge. Reporters found her building. Cameras flashed when she stepped outside. Neighbors looked at her differently, some with sympathy, others with envy, a few with scorn, yet Maya refused to hide. She continued to walk with her son in her arms, her back straight, her steps steady. When reporters shouted questions, she did not respond with anger. She simply said softly, "I am his mother, and that is enough." Her calm dignity disarmed them in ways they did not expect. Her silence became more powerful than their noise. Still, the pressure was immense. There were nights when she wept quietly after putting her son to sleep, her body trembling with the fear that this storm might consume them, that Travis's power could crush her completely. But each time she thought of giving in, she remembered the strength in her child's gaze, and she rose again with the dawn, determined to endure. For Travis, the storm grew unbearable. His business partners began to question him. Shareholders demanded explanations. The markets whispered doubts about a man who could control billions but not the truth of his own life. In private meetings, he felt the weight of their judgment pressing against him. Men who once envied him now smirked behind their hands. Women who once admired him now questioned his character. And in every reflection he saw, whether in the glass walls of his office or the mirrors of his mansion, he saw not the powerful figure he had crafted, but the shadow of a child he had tried to deny. The breaking point came one evening when Travis attended a charity gala, a gathering of the city's elite. The room glittered with chandeliers. The tables sparkled with crystal glasses, yet beneath the polished surface, tension simmered. Whispers rippled as he entered. Eyes turned toward him. And though he walked with his usual pride, his chest felt heavy during the speeches. A reporter in disguise slipped a question into the air. What does generosity mean to a man who denies his own blood? The room fell into stunned silence. All eyes turned to him. His hands tightened into fists. His jaw clenched, but no words came, and in that silence, the truth screamed louder than anything he could have said. He left the gala that night shaken, the weight of his denial crushing him in ways he could no longer control. When he arrived at his mansion, He walked through the grand halls like a man lost. He poured himself a drink but did not touch it. Instead, he sat in the quiet darkness, his mind filled with images of Maya standing strong, of his child reaching for her finger, of the way those storm-gray eyes had pierced him. And for the first time, he allowed himself to whisper the truth aloud. "He is mine." The words hung in the air, fragile yet powerful. They did not erase the pain he had caused. They did not absolve him of the abandonment he had chosen, but they were a crack of light breaking through the darkness he had built around himself. And once spoken, they could not be taken back. While he wrestled with his conscience, Maya prepared herself for whatever came next. She knew the storm was not over, that the world would continue to pry and judge. But she also knew that her love for her son was unshakable, that no headline or rumor could diminish the bond they shared. She whispered to him each night, "We are stronger than their words, my love. We are stronger than their cruelty." And with each whisper, her resolve deepened. The stage was set. The storm was at its peak, and the world was watching as two lives, once torn apart by denial, were now hurtling toward a confrontation that would define not only their future, but also the legacy of a child who had done nothing more than open his eyes and reveal the truth. The weight of truth. The following weeks carried a heaviness that neither Maya nor Travis could escape. For Maya, the days after the health scare were filled with renewed determination. She moved through her small apartment with steady purpose, preparing meals, cleaning, and caring for her son with a quiet resilience that amazed even herself. Each time she looked at his storm-gray eyes, she was reminded of the night Travis had stood by his crib. Unable to deny what he saw, she told herself it changed nothing, that she would continue raising her child with or without him. Yet deep inside she felt a shift because she knew now that he had seen the truth, and that knowledge carried its own power. For Travis, the shift was far more consuming. He returned to his world of polished tables, expensive suits, and powerful conversations. But the order he once commanded seemed fragile now. At board meetings, when executives spoke of mergers and profits, his mind would drift. He would see the face of a child staring at him with eyes that mirrored his own. He found himself distracted during high-stakes negotiations, his voice faltering when once it had been sharp. The people around him noticed. They whispered quietly that their leader seemed unsettled. Though no one dared question him directly, alone in his mansion at night, the silence grew unbearable. He would walk through endless halls decorated with art worth millions, yet none of it brought him peace. He poured glass after glass of whiskey, hoping to drown the image of Maya's steady gaze and the child's eyes that reflected back a truth he could no longer deny. But the more he drank, the louder those images became, pressing into his chest until sleep refused to come, and the world outside began to murmur. Though Maya had tried to keep her struggle private, whispers traveled quickly in a city that thrived on gossip. Stories spread of the maid who bore the child of a billionaire, of the man who denied him, of the rare storm-gray eyes that made the connection difficult to ignore. Newspapers did not print it yet, but conversations at high-end restaurants and social clubs carried the tale, and more than once Travis heard his own name tangled with questions spoken behind raised hands. The pressure unsettled him in ways he had never known. He had built his empire on control, on the ability to shape perception, but now his denial was slipping beyond his grasp. When he closed his eyes at night, he no longer heard the voices of doubters. He heard Maya's voice, calm but unyielding. "I have been his mother from the start. I have carried him alone. You walked away." Those words echoed louder than boardroom applause, louder than the hollow reassurances of his advisors. Maya, meanwhile, faced her own trials. The health scare had drained what little money she had managed to save. Bills pressed harder, groceries stretched thinner, and yet she never allowed despair to take root. Instead, she threw herself into work, taking on more cleaning jobs, scrubbing floors until her knees ached, washing clothes until her fingers cracked. But when she returned home, she always smiled for her son, because she refused to let him see the weight she carried. Neighbors continued to whisper, some with pity, others with disdain. But Maya held her head high, her dignity unshaken, and slowly those who watched her began to see something they had not before. They saw not a desperate woman chasing the shadow of a rich man, but a mother who stood unbroken in the face of cruelty. Some began to soften, offering small kindnesses, a bag of groceries, a kind word, a smile when she passed, and though she accepted little, the shift reminded her that strength had the power to inspire even in silence. One evening, as Travis sat in his office staring at a report he could not read, his assistant entered nervously. "Sir, there's a journalist asking questions about..." Personal matters about rumors regarding a maid and a child. Travis's hand tightened around the glass he held, his face turning cold, but inside, panic rippled. He waved the assistant away, yet he knew the walls were closing in. That night, he found himself driving alone, his car gliding through city streets without destination. Until almost unconsciously, he arrived near the small neighborhood where Maya lived. He parked at a distance, his eyes fixed on the dimly lit window of her apartment. He saw the shadow of her moving inside, holding the baby, rocking him gently. The sight pierced through his chest with a force he had not felt before, for in that moment he saw not a trap, not a lie, but a woman who had given everything for a child he had tried to abandon. He sat there for hours, unseen, watching, his mind a storm of guilt, fear, and longing. When he finally drove away, the city lights blurred with the weight of the truth he could no longer suppress. Maya never knew he was there that night. She only knew the silence of her apartment, the warmth of her baby's breath against her skin, and the certainty that whatever storms lay ahead, she would continue to endure. But destiny was moving them closer to a collision they could not avoid, because the cracks in Travis's denial had widened into fractures, and soon the entire wall he had built around his heart and reputation would come crashing down. And when it did, the world would be watching. The breaking point. The city moved forward as if nothing had changed. The tall buildings stood, the cars rushed past, people hurried to their jobs and homes, lives intersecting and separating like threads in a giant tapestry. Yet within this vast and indifferent world, Maya's life felt like a small island battered by waves that never ceased. Her days were marked by exhaustion, by endless choices of sacrifice, and by the constant whispers that followed her like shadows. Still, she endured, because when she looked into her child's eyes, she found the strength to stand again each morning. The baby was growing quickly, his small hands reaching out with curiosity, his laughter a sound that filled their small apartment with a light no one could steal. Maya clung to those moments, the giggles, the babbling, the way he grabbed her finger with surprising strength. She told herself that as long as he was healthy, as long as he was smiling, then she could endure anything. But life had its own tests waiting. One evening, after a long day of cleaning work for neighbors just to gather enough money for groceries, Maya returned home exhausted, her arms aching, her back stiff. She placed her son in his crib, humming softly as she prepared a small dinner of rice and beans. It was then that she heard it, a sound that froze her heart. The baby's cry was different, sharp, broken, desperate. She rushed to the crib and found him flushed, his small chest rising and falling too quickly. His storm-gray eyes wide with distress. Panic seized her. She wrapped him in a blanket and ran into the night, her steps pounding against the cracked sidewalks as she made her way to the nearest clinic. The nurses at the small underfunded clinic rushed to take the baby, placing him under lights, attaching monitors. Maya stood there trembling, her hands clasped together, tears streaming down her face. She whispered prayers under her breath, begging for her son's safety. She felt powerless, helpless in a way she had never known. The doctor explained that it was a respiratory infection, dangerous for a child so young, and that they would need to keep him under close watch. Maya nodded numbly, fear pressing into every corner of her body. She sat by his side all night, refusing to sleep, holding his tiny hand through the plastic of the crib, whispering stories of hope, promising him that he would be fine, that he was stronger than the sickness. Yet deep inside, fear gnawed at her. She wondered if her sacrifices had not been enough, if her strength had failed him. She thought of Travis in those hours, thought of the resources he had, the doctors he could afford, the hospitals he could access. Anger burned inside her at the thought that he had chosen denial over responsibility. The next morning, as Maya sat exhausted by her child's bedside, a nurse approached cautiously. "There's a man here asking questions about you," she said softly. Maya's heart jumped. She didn't want to hope, didn't want to believe, but part of her knew. She stepped into the hallway, and there he was. Travis, standing tall in his expensive coat, his expression unreadable, his eyes sharp but restless. For a moment they just stared at each other, the hallway heavy with unspoken words. Maya's chest tightened, her voice low and trembling. "Why are you here?" Travis shifted slightly, his jaw tightening. "I heard he was sick. I needed to see." His words were firm, but his tone carried something unfamiliar, something uncertain. Maya studied him, searching for sincerity, Part of her wanted to push him away, to tell him he had no right. But another part of her, the part that had spent the night terrified for her son, simply said, "Come." They walked together into the small room. The baby lay under the glow of monitors, his breathing steadier now but still fragile. Travis stepped closer, his eyes falling on the child's face. For a long moment he said nothing, just stared, and Maya watched as his carefully built walls began to falter. The storm-gray eyes blinked up at him, and in that gaze Travis saw not coincidence, not chance, but reflection, his reflection. He swallowed hard, his voice barely a whisper. He looks like me." The words slipped out before he could stop them. Maya's eyes filled with tears, not because she needed his acknowledgement, but because for the first time she saw the truth break through his denial. "I told you," she said softly, her hand resting gently on the crib. "You saw it the first day, you just didn't want to believe." Travis turned away, his chest rising and falling with unsteady breaths. He pressed a hand to his forehead, pacing. This changes everything," he muttered, his voice torn between fear and realization. Maya straightened her back, her exhaustion momentarily forgotten. "No, Travis, this changes nothing for me. I have been his mother from the start. I have carried him alone. I have fed him, held him, loved him. You walked away, and I will keep going even if you walk away again." Her words struck him harder than any accusation, because they were not angry. They were true, simple, undeniable. And for the first time, Travis felt the weight of his choices pressing down on him. The baby stirred, a soft whimper escaping his lips. Both Maya and Travis leaned forward instinctively, their hands almost brushing as they comforted him. Their eyes met, and for a fleeting moment, there was no wealth, no power, no whispers of society, only a child who bound them together with a truth that could no longer be ignored. Travis stayed longer than he expected, watching silently as Maya soothed their son, his mind a storm of thoughts, doubts, and regrets. When he finally left that evening, he walked into the cool night air with his chest heavy, his steps slower than usual. For the first time in his life, he felt that all his wealth, all his power, meant nothing compared to the fragile heartbeat of a child he had tried so hard to deny. Maya watched him leave from the window of the clinic, her emotions tangled. She did not know if his presence meant change. She did not know if he would truly accept responsibility. But she knew one thing with certainty. The cracks in his wall were growing wider, and soon the truth would no longer be something he could run from. And as she turned back to her son, she whispered gently, "Whatever happens, my love, you will never be alone. Not as long as I breathe." Cracks in the wall time passed in uneven rhythms for both Maya and Travis. For Maya, each day was a battle of survival. Her world measured not in wealth or luxury, but in the number of bottles she could prepare, in the hours of sleep she could steal, in the coins she counted late at night to make sure the rent would be paid. She lived in silence with her baby's cries echoing off the thin walls of her apartment, her strength stretched but never broken. She carried on with quiet dignity, telling herself again and again that love would be enough, that love was stronger than judgment. But for Travis, time did not move with the same rhythm. His world was filled with endless meetings, business deals, dinners with powerful people who hung on his every word. And yet in the middle of it all, he found himself distracted. He would sit at the long polished table of his boardroom, surrounded by screens and reports, and suddenly his mind would drift. His eyes would blur, and he would see storm-gray eyes staring back at him, small, fragile, and impossibly familiar. It unsettled him, angered him, made him restless. He told himself over and over that Maya had planned it, that she had found someone else and crafted this story to trap him. But the memory of that child's gaze refused to leave him. It lingered in his mind during quiet moments, when he sat in his mansion at night with a glass of expensive whiskey, when he looked in the mirror, shaving in the morning, when he closed his eyes in bed and tried to sleep. No matter how he pushed it away, it came back one evening. After a long day of meetings, Travis found himself walking through the empty halls of his home. The mansion was vast, cold, filled with art and silence, yet strangely hollow. He passed by the dining table where he had once seen Maya setting plates. Quiet and careful, he paused for a moment, his jaw tightening as the image of her cradling a baby in the hospital returned. He shook his head and muttered to himself, "Coincidence? It's nothing." Genetics are messy, but his voice lacked conviction. Meanwhile, Maya was facing storms of her own. The whispers had not stopped. In fact, they grew louder as time went on. People in her neighborhood seemed to delight in her struggle. At the grocery store, someone muttered, "She thought she was climbing to the top, but now look at her." At the church line, a woman whispered to her friend, "She's living off pity, trying to raise a billionaire's child with no proof." It hurt Maya, not because the words carried truth, but because they showed how quick people were to crush someone already on the ground. Still, she pushed forward. Her son was growing, his storm-gray eyes a constant reminder of both her pain and her hope. When she looked into them, she did not see Travis's denial. She saw promise. She saw strength. She saw a future worth fighting for. She would hold him close and whisper, "You will not be defined by his rejection. You will be defined by your light." Yet deep in the night, she sometimes questioned whether she could keep going alone. Exhaustion clawed at her. Bills piled up. Opportunities were scarce. She dreamed of a day when the world would stop seeing her as a mistake, when they would stop whispering and start listening. She wondered if that day would ever come. Fate, however, has a way of pulling people together in unexpected ways. One late afternoon, Travis was driven through the city in his sleek black car, the windows tinted, his mind lost in thought. At a stoplight, he glanced out absent-mindedly. His eyes fell on a young woman pushing a stroller across the street. Her shoulders tired but her back straight, her steps steady. Something about the scene pulled at him. His gaze narrowed, his breath caught for half a moment. He told himself it was nothing, but his heart gave him away. For in that stroller he thought he saw eyes staring back, storm gray, glinting even from a distance. His driver asked if he was all right. Travis waved him off quickly, leaning back into his seat, his pulse unsteady. He muttered under his breath, "It can't be. It's just coincidence." Yet as the car pulled away, the image followed him. That night, Travis sat in his office, staring at documents that refused to hold his attention. He poured himself another glass of whiskey, his mind replaying the sight of the stroller, the woman, the eyes. He slammed the glass down and whispered, "This needs to stop. I need to end this once and for all." But deep down he knew it wasn't about ending anything. It was about the truth he was terrified to face. Back in her apartment, Maya rocked her baby to sleep, her arms tired but steady, her voice humming softly. She thought of the future, of school, of work, of opportunities she wanted her son to have. She thought of how unfair it was that the man who could give him everything had chosen to give him nothing. And yet she promised again, quietly, that she would not let her child feel unloved. She would not let the whispers break him the way they tried to break her. She did not know that her strength, her resilience, her quiet endurance were not just holding her life together. They were slowly unraveling the walls around Travis's heart. Because every time he saw her face in his memory, every time he saw the eyes of their child, the denial grew harder to maintain. The cracks in his wall were forming, and soon they would widen beyond repair. The struggle begins. The days after the hospital confrontation stretched like a storm cloud that refused to pass. Maya left the hospital with her newborn son wrapped in a thin blanket. Walking out through the same doors where Travis had stormed away from her, the air outside was cold, sharp, and biting against her tired body. But she held the baby close, whispering to him with each step as though her words could shield him from the wind. Her heart ached with the memory of Travis's words, words that cut deeper than any blade. Yet she carried them silently, because she knew she had no choice but to move forward. The city streets were busy, people rushing past with bags, cars honking, voices blending into noise. No one looked at her. No one noticed the young black woman clutching a newborn while walking with heavy steps. But Maya felt the invisible stares anyway. She felt the judgment in the air. She had already heard enough whispers inside the hospital to know what people would say, that she was just another maid who tried to trap a rich man, that she was foolish to think she belonged anywhere near someone like Travis, that her child was a mistake rather than a miracle. She reached the small apartment she rented in a part of the city most billionaires would never step foot in. The walls were thin, the paint peeling. The hallways smelled of dust and damp air, but it was hers, and for now, it was the only place where she and her son could be safe. She placed him gently in the small crib she had bought with her savings, a crib that was secondhand, scratched, and old, but solid enough to hold the most precious thing in her life. As she watched him sleep, Maya felt the weight of everything pressing down on her, the rent that was due in 2 weeks, the groceries that would need buying, the medical bills that were already piling up from the birth, and the reality that she had no one to lean on. Her parents had passed years ago, She had no siblings, no close friends willing to take on the burden of helping a new mother. All she had was her strength and the child in front of her. Her mind drifted back to the days when she first worked in Travis's house. She remembered the way he would pass by with his cold but handsome face, the way he never really looked at her but always expected her to be there. She had never planned for what happened between them, never asked for it, and yet, when it did happen, she had held on to the hope that maybe he would see her as more than just the maid. Maybe he would see her heart, her kindness, her loyalty, but now she knew better. Now she knew he had never truly seen her at all. The days turned into weeks, and Maya found herself living in a rhythm of survival. She woke every night when her baby cried. She held him, rocked him, whispered lullabies. In the mornings, she tried to piece together her strength, making bottles, folding laundry, searching for small cleaning jobs she could do while caring for her child. Money was always tight. She skipped meals to make sure there was enough formula. She patched old clothes rather than buying new ones. Every choice was about sacrifice, and through it all, the whispers followed her. When she went to the grocery store, neighbors glanced at her and muttered, "She's the one who claimed the billionaire's child." Can you believe the nerve when she walked past the laundromat? Someone would laugh and say, "She's chasing a dream that doesn't exist." The man doesn't even recognize her kid. People didn't care about her truth. They only cared about the story that entertained them, the one where the poor black maid tried to climb too high. Yet Maya never responded, she never argued. Instead, she kept her head low and her focus sharp. Every insult she heard became fuel. Every laugh against her became a quiet fire in her chest. She told herself again and again, "This is not the end, this is the beginning. I will raise him, I will protect him. I will make sure he knows love even if the world denies him." Still, there were nights when the silence of the apartment felt like a prison, when the weight of loneliness pressed so hard she thought she would collapse. She would sit in the dim light of her bedroom, her baby finally asleep, and tears would roll down her face without sound. She never cried loudly, never allowed herself the release of shouting or sobbing. Her tears were always quiet, like a river flowing beneath the earth, unseen but endless sometimes in those nights. She would remember Travis's face, the flicker of hesitation he showed when he saw his son's eyes, that half-second where his wall cracked. She held on to that memory not because she wanted him back, not because she dreamed of his acceptance, but because it was proof that even he, in his arrogance and denial, saw the truth for a heartbeat, and she believed that one day, maybe, the truth would be too heavy for him to keep ignoring. But truth had its own timing, and for now, Maya's days were filled with struggle. One cold morning, as she pushed a stroller down the street toward a nearby church that offered free meals, she felt the eyes on her again. Mothers whispering as they held their own children. She thinks her child is special, but look at her, begging for food. Men shaking their heads with pity or disdain. Shouldn't have messed with people above her level. Now look where she is. Maya kept walking, her back straight, her chin lifted just enough to show she would not break. She collected the meal quietly, thanked the volunteers, and walked back home, her baby babbling softly in the stroller. She bent down and kissed his forehead, whispering, "You are worth everything. Every stare, every whisper, every sacrifice. You are worth it all." Still, the doubts clawed at her. She was human, she was tired, she was scared. She wondered how long she could keep going without support, how long before the bills became too heavy, how long before her body gave out from exhaustion. On one of those nights, when she was holding her son against her chest, his storm-gray eyes blinking up at her in the dim light, Maya whispered, "Maybe he'll come back. Maybe one day he won't be able to ignore you. Maybe he'll see what I see." And even though she didn't want to believe it, even though she told herself she didn't need Travis, a small part of her still carried that fragile hope. But what Maya didn't know was that outside her small world, Travis was already facing shadows of doubt. He had walked away from the hospital with fury, with denial. But deep in his mind, the image of those storm-gray eyes kept returning, haunting him in quiet moments, appearing in board meetings, in the reflection of his glass office windows, in the silence of his mansion. He told himself again and again that it was coincidence, that genetics were messy, but each time he repeated it, the words grew weaker, and though Maya could not see it yet, the truth was moving closer, like a tide that could not be stopped for now. She held her son through the nights, endured the whispers through the days, carried her pain in silence, and walked forward with the strength only a mother could carry. But deep inside, the cracks were forming in both their lives. In Maya's resolve, tested by endless struggle, and in Travis's denial, haunted by the eyes of a child he claimed was not his, and soon their paths would collide again. The denial, the sound of a newborn's cry filled the small hospital room, thin but strong, cutting through the air like a fragile thread of hope. Maya sat on the bed, her hospital gown loose around her thin shoulders, her skin glistening with the last effort of birth. She held her son close, his tiny chest rising and falling against her heart. She whispered soft words to him, words no one else could hear, words that carried all her strength. All her fears, all her love outside the hallway. Heavy footsteps echoed, rushed, impatient. Powerful, Travis walked in. Tall, broad, dressed in an expensive black coat that made him look more like a king than a man. His jaw was set, his eyes sharp, his face carved with arrogance. People moved aside when he entered. Nurses lowered their eyes. Even the doctor shifted uneasily. Maya's heart sank when she saw him. She had hoped he would come, hoped that maybe he would soften at the sight of their child, hoped that the man she once believed in still existed somewhere inside the billionaire who ruled his world with iron fists and cold smiles. But the moment his eyes landed on her, all her fragile hope cracked. "That baby ain't mine," Travis said, his voice booming through the room. Cold, final, brutal, like a hammer smashing glass. Maya flinched but didn't move away. She wrapped her arms tighter around her son, pressing him against her chest as though she could shield him from the storm that had just entered. Her lips trembled, but she kept them sealed. "You really think I'd fall for this?" Travis barked, stepping closer, his voice rising with each word. "A maid, a nobody, this is pathetic. I came here to be sure. To see it with my own eyes so you never pull this crap again." The words hit Maya harder than labor pains. She wanted to scream, to defend herself, but all she could do was whisper, her voice thin and broken. "Please just look at him." Travis leaned closer, his expensive cologne filling the air. His sharp eyes scanned the tiny face wrapped in a thin hospital blanket. "I did look. He looks like every other baby in this place. Don't play me, Maya. Genetics are messy. Anyone could have given you that child." Maya shifted her son slightly, turning his face toward the light. A shaft of morning sunlight slipped through the blinds, falling across the baby's tiny features. That was when it happened. Travis froze just for a second. The baby's eyes blinked open. Small, storm gray. An eerie, unmistakable hue, rare and strange. The same eyes Travis saw in the mirror every morning. The same eyes his father once had. For the first time, Travis's breath caught. His chest tightened. A flicker of recognition flashed across his guarded face, but just as quickly he shook it off. Straightening, hardening. "Nah," he muttered, shaking his head. "Coincidence, genetics don't prove anything." The silence that followed was heavy, like the air itself was holding its breath. Maya watched him, her own eyes red and swollen from tears. She saw that flicker, that crack in his wall. She knew he saw the truth. "You planned this!" Travis snarled suddenly, shattering the silence. "You probably had someone else's baby and figured you'd pin it on me. Must have thought it was your golden ticket." The words cut into Maya's heart like knives. She rocked her son gently, whispering into his hair as tears slipped silently down her face. "You think just because you worked in my house, just because you cleaned my floors and served my meals, you have the right to ruin my name," Travis spat, pacing like a predator trapped in his own anger. "You're trash. I gave you a job, and this is how you repay me. You're not just a liar. You're delusional." People in the hallway were watching now. Nurses, patients, family members waiting for their loved ones. Whispers spread through the air like wildfire. "She's just trying to trap him," one voice murmured. "She should be ashamed," another hissed. "A maid, can you imagine? Thinking she could." Maya heard it all, every word slicing into her. But she didn't speak. She didn't fight back. She just held her child tighter. The only thing that mattered, her tears were not loud, not dramatic. They were quiet, heavy, tired tears. The kind that fell when someone had been fighting battles alone for too long. Travis leaned in close again, his face twisted with rage. "You don't get it. Maya, you don't matter. You're nothing. And no child of yours will ever carry my name." Maya closed her eyes, pressing her lips against her baby's forehead, whispering, "You matter, my son. You matter." And though her voice was soft, though it trembled, it carried something stronger than Travis's fury. It carried love, pure and unshaken for a moment. Travis hesitated, his eyes flickering once more to the storm-gray gaze of the child in her arms. His chest rose and fell with a breath he didn't know he was holding. But then he straightened, shook his head and stormed out of the room, his expensive shoes pounding against the hospital floor. The door slammed shut behind him, leaving Maya in the quiet aftermath. She rocked her baby, whispering promises to him, promises of love, of survival. of a future she would build no matter how hard it became. Outside the door, the whispers continued. Judgmental, cruel, heavy, but inside that small room, it was just Maya and her child. Two souls bound together against a world that wanted to tear them apart. And though Maya's heart was breaking, though the weight of Travis's denial crushed her chest, she knew deep inside that this was only the beginning of their story. A story of truth, of resilience, of justice waiting to rise. Her tears fell onto her baby's soft skin, and as he blinked again, those storm-gray eyes looked up at her, silent, innocent, yet filled with a power she couldn't understand. We'll be okay, Maya whispered, her voice shaking but steady. No matter what, we'll be okay. The baby's tiny hand curled around her finger, holding on as if making the same promise. And somewhere deep inside, Maya believed it.